My name is Avery Bennett. I'm 34 years old. And on Christmas morning, my sister got a brand new Mercedes C-Class with a red bow, so big it brushed the living room ceiling. While I unwrapped a $3.49 ceramic owl bank stuffed with three $1 bills, Dad laughed, called it my future house fund. Mom clapped like it was adorable. The smell of pine, perfume, and fake joy burned in my throat as I smiled for their photo. But what they didn't know was that this would be the last Christmas I ever spent under their roof. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. If you've ever smiled through the pain just to keep the peace. Because what happened that morning didn't start with a cheap gift. I grew up in a beige two-story house on Hawthorne Street, Portland, where the air always smelled faintly of lemon polish and Dad's aftershave. From the outside, we looked perfect. Two daughters, one golden retriever. Christmas lights hung straight as military lines. Inside, it was a stage set, every emotion rehearsed, every smile timed. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, they'd see me. My earliest memory, Sloane's 5th birthday, pink everywhere streamers, balloons, a rented clown, the kind that made balloon animals and terrified toddlers in equal measure. She got a Polaroid camera, instant film spilling across the table like candy. I remember standing beside the cake, frosting thick and sugary, and asking if I could take a picture too. Dad laughed, said, "Let your sister have her moment, Avery." The next year, my birthday, two friends from kindergarten, a grocery store sheet cake with uneven frosting and a plastic happy birthday topper slightly melted on one side. Mom told me, "It's the thought that counts." But the thought didn't count for much when I watched her wrapping Sloane's mountain of gifts the week before. I swallowed the hurt, the way kids do when they're too young to name betrayal. By middle school, the pattern was routine. Report cards came home, mine lined with A's, hers scattered with excuses. Dad's face would light up only when Sloane showed potential. He said art was expression, while my math awards were expected. Mom's praise was always followed by a "but you're so responsible, Avery, but you could smile more. You're mature, but don't make Sloane feel bad." It's strange how love can sound like a compliment until you listen closely. I used to do homework at the kitchen counter, while Mom helped Sloane with craft projects for school, papier-mâché planets, painted dioramas, things I wasn't allowed to touch because I might ruin the vision. When Sloane won first place in the art fair, the ribbon hung on the fridge for years. My science trophy spent 2 days there before disappearing into a box labeled storage. I didn't know it then, but that box was where my parents kept everything that didn't fit their picture of family perfection, my accomplishments, my feelings, my voice. The house had its own rhythm, the clinking of Dad's whiskey glass after work, the hum of Mom's voice on the phone, telling her friends how proud she was of her creative one, the sound of Sloane's laughter echoing through the hall as she called me Miss Spreadsheet. Sometimes, after everyone went to bed, I'd sit on the top step and listen to them talk in the living room. One night I heard Dad sigh, "Avery will be fine no matter what. It's Sloane I worry about." Mom agreed. "Exactly, she needs more support." That's when I understood. In our house, being strong was a liability. It made you invisible. By high school, the distance between us was measured in expectations. I had curfews, rules, accountability. Sloane had freedom and trust. When I asked for the same, Dad said, "You're different, Avery. You don't make impulsive choices." He meant, I don't have to care if you fall. Graduation night, I was valedictorian. My speech about persistence, about building your own foundation, earned a standing ovation. But when I turned toward the audience, the family seats were empty. Mom later said Sloane's soccer team had a tournament 2 hours away. "We didn't want her to feel left out," she explained, as if my achievement was less important than my sister's feelings. I remember that drive home, the smell of damp grass through the open car window, the sound of my speech crumpled in my lap. It was the first time I let anger replace sadness. But anger, in our family, was forbidden, so I smiled. I told them it was fine, and I believed it had to be. College came like a rescue, disguised as debt. I earned scholarships but still needed loans, $72,000. I'm still paying off. I took shifts at the campus bookstore and the cafeteria. Sloane, meanwhile, announced she was finding herself and took an 8-month art tour through Europe, fully funded by Mom and Dad. I called once from a dorm payphone, exhausted and freezing. "Just checking in," I said, hoping for some warmth. Mom replied, "We're proud of you, sweetheart. But you sound tired. Maybe don't overdo it. You don't have to prove anything." But I did. Because in our house, love was never given freely, it was earned through usefulness. During senior year, Grandma passed away. She'd been the only one who noticed when I was quiet too long, or when my smile didn't reach my eyes. Her inheritance was supposed to help me start life debt-free. Instead, Dad said, we used it for something important, a business investment for Sloan's design studio. He called it family money. I called it theft. That night, I sat in my dorm room, staring at my student loan statement and the letter Grandma had written me before she died. It ended with, "You don't owe anyone to be loved." I folded it carefully and placed it inside my first architectural blueprint tube, where it stayed ever since. When I got my first full-time job as a junior structural engineer, I sent gifts home: a leather briefcase for Dad, a silver bracelet Mom had admired, a new printer for Sloan's studio. They thanked me in a group text. 2 emojis. No words. Holidays became tests of endurance. Thanksgiving dinners where Dad quizzed me about deadlines while bragging about Sloan's clients. Mom poured more wine and played peacemaker, pretending not to notice how I ate faster just to escape the table. The worst part wasn't the favoritism, it was the way they made it sound logical. Sloan's creative field is harder. She needs more help networking. You're the stable one. Stable, capable, independent. Their polite way of saying, you don't need love. I didn't know it back then, but that language, those labels, were the foundation of everything that would crumble later. The first Christmas after I bought my own car, a used Toyota, I drove home 7 hours through snow to surprise them. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the windows glowing gold. Inside, Sloan was showing off a designer handbag. Dad handed her keys to a new apartment for her business. When I mentioned my promotion, he said, "That's great, but don't burn out chasing titles. You should learn from your sister, she knows how to enjoy life." That was the moment I realized my success wasn't invisible, it was inconvenient. Later that night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom. The wallpaper still had faint marks where Sloan's posters used to hang. Downstairs, laughter and clinking glasses. I thought of leaving then, just driving until the road ran out. But I stayed, because leaving would mean admitting they'd never change. Now, years later, I understand something I couldn't see back then. Every dismissal, every small cruelty, every time they told me I was too sensitive, was laying the groundwork for one inevitable question. What happens when the strong one finally stops carrying the family? That question was answered on Christmas morning, decades later, when the smell of fake pine and cheap wrapping paper became the scent of breaking point. By the time I turned 30, family visits had become short layovers between work projects. I told myself I was too busy for long holidays, but truthfully, I just couldn't stand the weight of being in that house for more than 2 nights. The air there carried the residue of favoritism, like stale perfume clinging to a curtain. I lived in Seattle then, working for an engineering firm that believed in measurable results. Numbers didn't lie. Unlike people, I poured everything into my career: the blueprints, the calculations, the quiet satisfaction of buildings that stayed standing no matter the weather. I like the metaphor. Still, every holiday season, I found myself driving south through the mountain passes, praying the snow would give me an excuse to turn back. It never did. Mom would always greet me with that careful warmth she reserved for guests, not daughters. "You look tired, honey. Working too hard again?" Then she glanced toward Sloan and add, "You should take a page from your sister's book. Balance is everything. Balance." In our family, balance meant me carrying both ends of the scale. One Thanksgiving, I arrived early, arms full of groceries, thinking I'd help cook. The counters were already covered with catering boxes labeled Sloan's menu. She breezed in wearing designer heels and kissed my cheek. I told Mom and Dad I'd handle dinner this year. Presentation matters. I stood there, holding a bag of potatoes like an idiot. Dad looked up from his phone and said, "See? She's taking initiative. Finally found her niche." I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. After dinner, as everyone gushed over the food she didn't actually cook, I washed dishes alone. From the dining room, I heard Mom say, "Avery never complains, bless her heart." She was right. I didn't complain. Complaining implied hope that something might change. The breaking point had been building for years, like pressure inside a structure no one inspects until it's too late. When I bought my own condo in Seattle, a one-bedroom with cracked hardwood floors and a view of the Sound, Dad refused to co-sign. Said it was better for you to stand on your own 2 feet. 3 months later, he co-signed a downtown loft lease for Sloan's studio. I told myself it didn't matter. Independence was its own reward. But when he bragged about her entrepreneurial spirit, I felt something inside me snap, a quiet, dangerous fracture. Then came Grandma's will. The inheritance I was supposed to receive was small, but meaningful enough to pay off my student loans. When I asked about it, Dad waved his hand. It went toward a family investment. You'll benefit eventually. Family investment turned out to be a $40,000 infusion into Sloan's rebranding project. When I protested, Mom said, "Sweetheart, money isn't everything. You have stability. Sloan just needs a chance." A chance. I'd been giving them chances for 34 years. After Grandma's death, I started keeping evidence receipts, screenshots, bank transfers. Not because I planned revenge back then, but because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that the numbers matched the feeling. I remember one night, sitting in my car outside their house, scrolling through the photo album on my phone. Every major event, graduations, birthdays, family trips. Sloan was always in the center. I was there too, on the edges, sometimes cropped out. The camera loved her the way my parents did. Perfectly framed, brightly lit. When Sloan got engaged for the first time briefly, to a musician she met at a gallery, Mom threw her a lavish engagement party. I designed and printed the invitations myself, trying to save them money. During the toast, Dad raised his glass and said, "To our shining star." I stood there, clapping, feeling invisible in a room full of people who thought they knew our family. The engagement lasted 6 months. The favoritism lasted a lifetime. Years later, that same pattern replayed during Christmas. The one that broke me. That morning, as Sloan squealed over her new Mercedes, I stared at the cheap owl bank in my lap. It wasn't about the gift, it was the message. You'll never be the priority here. Dad called it a symbolic gesture. Mom said, it's the thought that counts. The thought counted exactly $3. I smiled for their picture, pretending the lights from the tree weren't burning my eyes. When Sloan patted my knee and said, "Don't worry, sis. I'll drive you around when your old car dies," I felt something shift deep inside me. Not anger, clarity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I listened to their laughter drift up from downstairs, the familiar clinking of glasses. I remembered every time they said, "You're fine, Avery. You don't need us." Maybe they were right. At 3:42 a.m., I packed quietly just my essentials: laptop, blueprint tube, the smoky quartz pendant Maya had given me in college, and the owl bank. I left the gifts I'd bought them under the tree. They didn't need my effort. They never noticed it anyway. Downstairs, I placed my house key on the kitchen counter beside the coffee maker that would beep in 3 hours. The hum of the refrigerator was the only witness. For a second, I hesitated. Then I whispered, "This isn't home anymore." Outside, snow fell in thick, silent sheets. I slid behind the wheel of my Toyota, the same one Dad threatened to report stolen, and started the engine. Bing Crosby was singing about white Christmases on the radio. I turned the volume down until his voice disappeared. The road stretched ahead, empty but endless. I passed the leaving Portland sign and didn't look back. Somewhere near Eugene, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. I let it ring, then another from Dad, then Sloan. None of them asked if I was safe. Just one text from Mom. "Did you remember to pay the cabin's electric bill?" The same cabin they used for weekend getaways. Always under my name for convenience. A week later, I'd find out why that account was tied to my credit. Another small betrayal buried under years of habit. But that night, driving south through the storm, I didn't know any of that. I only knew that I was done being the responsible one who never left. When I stopped at a roadside diner in Southern Oregon, the smell of coffee and frying bacon felt like oxygen. The waitress, her name tag read, Ruth, poured me a cup without asking. "Rough night?" she said. "Rough life," I muttered. She smiled, lines around her eyes deep and kind. "Honey, blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family." Her words hit me harder than any insult my parents ever gave. I wrote them down on a napkin before I left. Later, I'd tape it above my desk as a reminder. By sunrise, I'd made it to the California border. My hands shook as I texted Maya. Still alive. Heading your way. Her reply came instantly. Doors open. Drive safe. As the first light spilled over the mountains, something inside me shifted again. It wasn't hope yet, just relief. Relief that I'd finally chosen myself. I didn't know it then, but that single decision to walk away without permission would set off everything that followed. The revenge. The reckoning. The quiet rebuilding of a life on my own terms. Because the truth is, leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was the blueprint for everything I'd become. San Francisco smelled different: salt air, diesel buses, possibility. When I arrived at Maya Torres's apartment in the Mission District, she was already holding a spare key. You can stay as long as you need, she said. Matter of fact, no pity, just safety. For the first week, I slept like someone who'd survived a storm. Every creak of the building made me think of Dad's footsteps. Every vibration of my phone felt like another accusation from home. The messages poured in: voicemails, texts, even a long email thread titled Family Concern. Dad's first message: if you don't return that Toyota, I'll have to report it stolen. Mom's followed an hour later. My blood pressure is through the roof because of you. Do you want me in the hospital? I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I hit delete all. Maya slid a mug of coffee toward me. You don't owe them a reaction, she said. Her voice was calm, anchored. I wanted to believe her, but silence had always been their weapon, not mine. 3 days later, I stood outside the San Francisco office of Whitaker & Co., palms sweating despite the cold. The building's glass facade reflected the city skyline: strong lines, clean edges, exactly what I wanted for my life. I met Graham Whitaker that afternoon. He glanced at my portfolio, then said, "We need engineers who don't panic when things crack." "I design so they don't," I answered. He smiled. "You start Monday." It was the first time in years that someone looked at my work and saw value instead of obligation. But peace never lasts long when guilt has your number. The next week, I came home to find the mailbox stuffed with letters from Oregon, unopened envelopes with my parents' handwriting. One was thicker, legal-looking. Inside, a printed notice showing my name listed as secondary guarantor on the utilities for the family's mountain cabin. My credit tied to a house I didn't visit in years. I called Mom, trying to keep my voice level. "You signed my name?" "Oh, don't be dramatic, Avery," she said. "It was just paperwork. You're so good with bills. I knew you'd keep it organized." "That's fraud." Her sigh crackled through the phone. "Everything is so black and white with you. No wonder you're alone." Click. That night, I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell beside the couch. Screen spiderwebbed. Maya didn't ask what happened. She just handed me tape and said, "Let's fix what we can." In therapy, Dr. Alana Rhodes asked me to list what I'd lost by leaving. I said, my family, my peace, my sense of duty. Then she asked what I'd gained. I stared at the carpet for a long time before whispering, "Control." The following weekend, I signed a lease for a small apartment managed by a woman named Nina Park. The place was quiet: wood floors, tall windows, sunlight pooling like honey in the afternoons. Nina handed me the keys and said, "It's yours now. No strings, no shared names on bills, no invisible debts." For a while, things felt almost normal. Work, pottery classes, therapy, sleep. I even laughed again. Real laughter that didn't echo off judgment. Then Sloan found a new way to reach me. It started with an Instagram post. A black and white photo of her looking solemn, captioned, "Praying for those who are struggling with mental health in my family. Love heals." Comments flooded in heart emojis. "Stay strong. Family first." I scrolled through them in disbelief. She hadn't spoken to me in months, yet now I was her brand's empathy campaign. When I texted her, "Delete it," she replied, "It's not about you. Don't be so self-centered." Later, a friend of hers messaged me anonymously, admitting the post wasn't even written by Sloan. It was drafted by her PR manager to keep sponsorships intact. My anger turned cold, sharp. They turned my silence into marketing. At work, Graham noticed my distraction. "Everything okay?" he asked one evening as I reviewed load calculations. I hesitated, then said the truth. "Family fallout." He nodded once. "Then build something solid enough they can't shake it." So I did. I poured myself into a project, the Richardson Tower, an eco-friendly high-rise overlooking the bay. Every beam, every joint felt like a rebuttal to my past. But the universe wasn't done testing my boundaries. One rainy Thursday, security buzzed me from the front desk. "A Sloan Bennett here to see you." Before I could answer, I heard Maya's voice in the background, sharp, protective. "She's in a meeting, and she'll stay that way for uninvited visitors." When I came down later, Sloan was gone, but a manila envelope waited at reception. Inside was a note in her handwriting. "We need to talk. Stop acting like you're perfect." There was no return address. Just an old photo of us as kids, her grinning with cake on her face, me blurry in the background. For a moment, I almost missed her. Then I remembered the post, the lies, the years. Nostalgia is dangerous. It edits out the evidence. That night, I logged every voicemail, every message, every financial document I still had. A habit, maybe, but also instinct. Engineers anticipate collapse before it happens. I didn't know it yet, but I was already building the case that would end the charade. 3 months after I moved to San Francisco, my life had structure again. Mornings began with coffee and the hum of traffic outside Mission Street. Work filled the days, pottery and therapy shaped the evenings. For the first time, silence felt peaceful instead of punishing. But peace has a way of drawing attention from those who profit off your chaos. It started with Aunt Joanne's email chain. Subject line: family reconciliation because forgiveness is divine. She wrote, "Your parents are heartbroken, dear. We all make mistakes. Don't let pride ruin the family." Attached was a selfie of Mom looking frail, hand pressed to her chest like a martyr. I almost laughed. Her hair was still perfect, makeup untouched. 2 days later, Uncle Peter called. "Family sticks together. Avery, does that include fraud and emotional manipulation?" I asked. He coughed. Unprepared. "You sound angry." "I'm done sounding agreeable." Click. The flying monkeys were gathering. At therapy that week, Dr. Rhodes smiled softly. "When you set boundaries, the people who benefited from you not having them will call it betrayal." "I know," I said, though knowing didn't make it easier. Work became my anchor. Richardson Tower was halfway complete, and Graham trusted me with more oversight. I thrived on deadlines, calculations, and steel that behaved logically unlike humans. Then came the call from Dad. He'd never been one for apologies. His voice always carried the tone of a man used to being obeyed. "You've made your point," he said. "Now it's time to come home." "This isn't a standoff," I replied. "Then stop acting like a victim. Your mother's been sick with worry." "She always is," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. "You think you're better than us now? That job, that apartment, it's nothing without family." Pause. "I built all of it without you." The silence on the line wasn't surprise, it was fury. He hung up. 2 weeks later, Sloan posted photos from what she called a healing family brunch. The captions read, "Learning to forgive, even when people don't apologize." She tagged everyone but me. The comments painted her as the hero, the peacemaker. I scrolled through them during my lunch break, thumb frozen over a heart emoji someone had left under her post. "You're such an inspiration." My stomach turned. That evening, as I walked home from work, my phone buzzed again. "Mom." Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hi, sweetheart," she said sweetly, the tone she used when she wanted something. "We just got a letter from the bank. Something about the second mortgage. They said you might need to sign." I stopped walking. "What mortgage?" "Oh, it's nothing. Just some paperwork for the house. Your father's been reorganizing finances." "Mom, did you use Grandma's inheritance as collateral?" Her silence said everything. "You told me it went to Sloan's studio," I said. "It's all family money, Avery." I laughed. A cold, broken sound. "You're right, and I'm done being part of this family's balance sheet." That night, I emailed myself copies of every bank statement I'd ever seen. Every text, every voicemail. I stored them in a hidden folder labeled Blueprints, the irony not lost on me. The next morning, I woke to 34 unread messages. Most were from relatives. But one subject line stopped me. "Legal notice. Property guarantor review." Mom had done it again. She'd listed me as a secondary guarantor on the family's cabin utilities and a joint signer for the home insurance renewal. Without my consent. Maya found me pacing the kitchen. "You're shaking," she said. "I'm furious," I answered. "And I'm done reacting. It's time to prepare." Together, we documented everything. Screenshots, emails, dates. She helped me label files, each one like a brick in a wall I was finally building for myself. A week later, while waiting for therapy, I scrolled through my social media feed and froze. Someone had leaked one of my old high school photos, a dorky, braces and bangs shot. The caption read, "We all have glow-ups. Some of us just needed family love to get there." Sloan again. This time, I didn't text her. I didn't call. I posted nothing. I just watched as her followers turned my silence into a story. Estranged sister. Mental breakdown. Jealousy. Let them talk, I thought, because while they were busy rewriting the past, I was collecting the proof that would end their narrative. That same night, I had dinner with Graham and a few colleagues. The conversation turned casual, laughter easy. Noah Patel, environmental engineer. Thoughtful eyes sat across from me. When I mentioned Portland, he asked, "Do you ever miss home?" I hesitated. "No, but sometimes I miss the idea of it." He nodded, like he understood. When we said goodnight outside the restaurant, he offered to walk me to my car. For once, I said yes. As we passed under the streetlight, he said, "People always think bridges are just steel and concrete. But they move, you know. They bend with the wind." I smiled. Guess I'm learning that too. Driving home, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of them. Not of the lies. The anxiety had hardened into something steadier resolve. Back in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds, I opened my blueprints folder. One last message from Sloan blinked at the top of the screen. "See you at Lila's wedding. Maybe we can finally talk like sisters." I stared at it for a long time, then typed my reply. "Sure. But this time, I'm the one bringing the receipts." I didn't know it yet, but that wedding would become the final structural test, the moment when the foundation of our family finally gave way. And I was ready to watch it collapse. The Magnolia Gardens estate in Portland glowed like a movie set, gold light spilling from chandeliers. Violins rehearsing behind closed doors, laughter echoing down the marble corridor. I stood at the entrance, clutching the smoky quartz pendant around my neck, feeling the weight of 7 months settle in my chest. This was the first time I'd been home since the Christmas I left. My name was on the guest list, barely. Lila's wedding, they said, was a family reunion. I called it a battleground. I spotted them before they saw me. Mom in an emerald dress. Dad in his tailored suit. Sloan by their side in cream silk, as if she'd come straight from a photo shoot. For a second, my pulse faltered. Then I remembered the legal notices, the Instagram posts, the inheritance theft. Mom's hand flew to her chest when she saw me. "Avery," she whispered, tears forming like clockwork. "You came." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss the show." Inside, the air was thick with roses and expensive perfume. Every table had a seating card. Every glass gleamed under fairy lights. And there, near the front, was the original seating chart, my name between Mom and Dad, directly across from Sloan. A perfect stage. Except I'd already changed it. When Vanessa, the event coordinator, looked at the list weeks ago, I'd asked quietly, "Can I switch to a seat near the bridal party?" She didn't question it. Now, when the family sat down, they'd realized the symmetry was broken. But not yet. First, the library. The double doors creaked open as I stepped inside. Shelves lined with leather-bound books climbed to the ceiling. A fireplace crackled faintly beneath portraits of ancestors who'd probably perfected denial long before my parents were born. They were waiting. Mom sat stiff-backed in a high chair, tissues clutched like props. Dad paced by the mantel, his glass already half empty. Sloan stood by the window, arms crossed, looking bored but wary. "Thank God," Mom breathed. "We need to talk as a family." I didn't move closer. "The ceremony starts in 40 minutes. Then let's make it quick," Dad said, his tone all authority and impatience. "This has gone on long enough." He gestured for me to sit. I didn't. Sloan broke first. "You've made everyone miserable, Avery. Dad lost his job. Mom's in therapy. We're selling the house." "Because of me?" I asked quietly. "You walking out started all of it," she snapped. I reached into my bag and pulled out a leather-bound photo album, setting it on the table between us. "Funny, I thought it started here." Dad frowned. "What's this supposed to prove?" Patterns, I said. Something engineers are good at. I opened the first page. 2 birthdays. One with Sloane's Princess Castle, the other with my grocery store cake. Next, 2 graduations. Hers with a full audience. Mine with empty seats. Then Christmas photos, the Mercedes bow shining. My cheap owl bank beside it. The room went still except for the hiss of the fire. "This is ridiculous," Dad muttered. "Then here's something less ridiculous." I placed a folder on top of the album. Inside printouts of bank transfers, side by side. Avery student loan payment schedule. Sloan business account deposit. Same amount, same month. Mom's hand trembled. "Where did you get those?" "Public record," I said simply. "You co-signed her studio loan using Grandma's inheritance as collateral. The same inheritance you told me was gone." I checked the property filings. "It's all there." Sloane's voice cracked. "You're spying on us?" "I'm documenting abuse," I corrected. "Big difference." Dad slammed his glass down, liquid splashing onto the mahogany. "You've gone too far." "No, you did," I said. "When you used my credit without asking. When you lied. When you turned every act of love into leverage." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm not finished." I slid another envelope across the table. "Your mortgage renewal. The one listing me as a guarantor." I didn't sign it. I called the bank. Mom's voice broke into a whisper. "It was just convenience." "No, Mom." I cut in. "It was control." Then, I took out the last object, the owl bank. Its paint chipped slightly from years of handling. I set it in the center of the table and twisted open the bottom plug. A stream of crisp $2 bills spilled out, fluttering across the wood like pale green feathers. The sound was sharp. "Final. I've saved one for every week since I left," I said. 34 weeks. 99. 34 reminders of what freedom costs and what it's worth. For once, no one spoke. Even Sloane's eyes flickered with something like shame. I looked at each of them, one by one. "You taught me that strength means never needing help. You taught me love has conditions. You taught me silence keeps peace. I believed all of it until I realized it only kept you comfortable." Mom's tears fell, real this time. "We never meant." "Intent doesn't erase impact," I said. Dad leaned forward, face red. "You think humiliating us makes you right?" "No," I replied softly. "It makes me free." The clock chimed the half hour. Outside, the faint sound of string music drifted in Lila's ceremony about to begin. I gathered my folder and the empty owl bank, leaving the bills scattered like evidence at a crime scene. "I'm not here for revenge," I said, pausing at the door. "I'm here for accountability. You want a relationship? Start by telling the truth." Mom's voice trembled. "What if we can't? Then this is the last time you'll ever see me." As I stepped into the hallway, the music swelled, violins rising, laughter echoing. The contrast felt cinematic. Behind me, Dad's voice cracked for the first time in my life. "Avery." I turned slightly, meeting his eyes. For a split second, the man who taught me fear looked small, broken, almost human. "Family sticks together," he whispered. I smiled faintly. "Only if it's built on something that can hold weight." And then I walked away, heels clicking on the marble floor like the tick of a clock finally running on my time. In the reflection of the glass door, I saw my own face, calm, clear, unflinching. The woman who'd once accepted crumbs now carried proof of the entire feast. Outside, evening light bled gold over the gardens. Guests turned as I passed, murmuring greetings I barely heard. The music swelled, the bride appeared, and somewhere behind me, my family sat in a silence loud enough to last generations. That was the moment I stopped being their scapegoat and became my own witness. And the best part? The real reckoning hadn't even started yet. The night after the wedding, Portland was drowned in mist. I sat in my hotel room at the Hilton, the same room I'd booked months ago with my own credit card, my name, my terms. Outside the window, the city glowed soft and wet under the rain. I should have felt empty. But instead, there was a stillness, like the air after a storm. On the nightstand lay my folder, my blueprints. Every file, every photograph, every receipt that had once felt like a wound was now part of my design. I hadn't shouted, hadn't thrown anything, hadn't begged. I'd simply laid out the evidence and walked away. It was the cleanest demolition I'd ever done. At 11:03 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sloane. "You didn't have to embarrass them like that." They're broken. Happy now? I typed back. Truth doesn't break people. It exposes what's already cracked. Then I hit send. I thought that would be the end of it. But revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a chain reaction set off by gravity. 2 days later, Graham called from the San Francisco office. Avery, you've been promoted senior project manager. Richardson Tower's completion report came through. Clean work, solid leadership. Thank you, I said, and meant it. When I returned to San Francisco, Maya was waiting at my apartment with a bottle of champagne and 2 mismatched mugs. You did it, she grinned. I didn't do anything, I said, pouring. I just stopped pretending. A week later, Dr. Rhodes asked in session, do you want reconciliation? I want honesty, I said. Reconciliation can come after that, if it ever does. But the universe has a dark sense of humor. A month after the wedding, Sloane's studio closed. Her Mercedes had already been repossessed. She was working part-time at a marketing firm. One night, she texted me a photo. Her first pottery bowl misshapen. Lopsided but hers. Trying something new, she wrote. Thanks for the budget spreadsheet. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Then came an email from Mom. We've started therapy. Your father's attending AA. Maybe it's too late, but we're trying. Attached was a scanned document proof they'd removed my name from every financial tie. I sat staring at the screen until my eyes blurred. No tears, just quiet relief. The owl bank sat on my kitchen shelf, now filled not with money, but with folded paper notes, each one a lesson I'd learned the hard way. The last one read, freedom isn't walking away. It's knowing you could, and choosing not to need to. They thought I destroyed the family. But all I did was rebuild the foundation one truth at a time. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't revenge. It was structural integrity. If you've ever been the responsible one, the quiet fixer, the person who held your family together while they tore you apart, this story is for you. Hit like if you've ever felt invisible in your own home. Subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ruins they left behind. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't yelling or fighting or proving them wrong. It's simply living better, freer, louder than they ever expected. And trust me, this story isn't over.